In this module, we will look at how sustainable waste and resource management strategies can be integrated in climate adaptation planning and resilience building. To avoid oversimplifying the other key processes and interdependent aspects of urban ecosystems that influence the production, flow, and consumption of material and energy in cities, we will revisit the concept of urban metabolism pattern towards making cities and communities sustainable. We will review at a fundamental level the concepts of urban ecological systems, multidimensional patterns, and processes that characterize cities and their surrounding areas. The second part will explore the ecological dimensions of urban resilience and sustainability, drawing insights from sustainable solid waste management practices. We will also be referring to some of the concepts and terms we introduced in Module 1 to explain relevant concepts in this module. We will also look at some approaches to map out and engage relevant actors and stakeholders. This is necessary to understand the roles stakeholders can play in supporting the efforts of mainstreaming sustainable waste and resource management in resilience building and adaptation. We will also demonstrate with practical examples the multi-sector mapping and engagement approaches. Let us do a little deep dive into how adopting sustainable waste and resource management practices in both cities and rural areas can support building resilience and strengthening adaptation. We will consider material, water, energy, and nutrient flows within the context of rural-urban linkages and how applying SWRM strategies within their unique context alleviates wastage while promoting resource security. Carefully consider the following infograph from the IRC 2018, which groups human needs, including those of resource-dependent people. Cities also need to integrate climate risk into sectoral and urban planning. From our discussions, we can see that adaptation strategies can be integrated with other city-level policies and action plans. In the built environment, resource scarcity, climate threats, and hazards impact many areas, including urban infrastructure systems for energy, transport, telecommunications, water, and wastewater, solid waste, buildings, and food, which are all interdependent. The urban context is characterized by several important properties, of which resilience is one of the most relevant infrastructure systems in urban environments, with critical interdependencies and highly vulnerable to natural hazards. Extreme weather events cause ripple effects across these systems, with damaged facilities and reduced services in one sector impacting on others. Let us have a look at the sustainable solid waste management strategies and how they connect with urban resilience building and adaptation strengthening. Cities account for 70 to 75% of all natural resource consumption. The Weight of Cities report, Resource Requirements of Future Urbanization, published by the IRP in 2018, projects the urban population to increase by 78%, with a 116% increase in urban material consumption, for example 40 billion tons in 2010 compared to approximately 90 billion in 2050. Material use has been widely considered a proxy for environmental impacts that such use will cause, primarily from extraction, production, or transformation, consumption, and ultimately disposal. By undertaking resource assessments, urban decision makers can evaluate their resource base, which is the resources available to them, where resources are entering the city, what processes these resources go through, and where the outputs are exported. These assessments enable decision makers to identify opportunities to improve resource efficiency, which can reduce both the environmental impacts and financial costs of production and consumption. There are opportunities to address these concerns though. Increased resource efficiency and productivity. This implies adding greater value to resources, maintaining that value by keeping resources in use over longer use cycles, and reducing the environmental impacts associated with the whole life cycle of resources from their extraction to their disposal. A resource-efficient city minimalizes resource extraction, including material and energy flows to and from a city's hinterland, energy consumption, and waste generation, while simultaneously safeguarding ecosystems. Considering the connections between resilience and resource efficiency can help cities realize significant co-benefits. Resource efficiency follows understanding the need to improve human well-being and provisioning with reduced resource use and at lower negative environmental impact. This approach is necessary to lower the domestic material consumption of cities, which is projected to reach about 8 to 17 tons per person per year, far exceeding the estimated 6 to 8 tons per capita per year. Resource efficiency means that the more efficient use of materials such as biomass, fossil fuels, metal ores, and non-metallic minerals can slow down the rate at which natural resources are depleted. A circular economy approach is underpinned by decoupling economic activity from consumption of finite resources. It enjoins systems by design to eliminate waste and pollution, circulate products and materials at their highest possible value, and regenerate nature. This means that services, products, and consumption will have low material intensity and emissions, while waste generation will be kept to the most minimal form. This will reduce the burden of resource exploitation, as well as sanitation and waste management systems. Economic, social, and environmental benefits are associated with sustainable waste and resource management practices at both micro and macro levels. For example, waste management burdens on local governments will be reduced, while also eliminating mismanaged wastes that contribute to poor health and sanitation in cities. Increased recycling, reuse, and refurbishing of products has the potential to lower the overall material footprint while reducing waste generation. Operating with lower resource throughput reduces economic vulnerability to price volatility in the global raw materials markets and limits the environmental impacts that occur with resource extraction in agriculture, forestry, fishing, mining, and quarrying. At the same time, the higher productivity of material use should have a positive impact on economic activity, just like other types of productivity gains. Stronger economic growth from resource efficiency more than compensates for the slower, medium-term economic growth associated with ambitious global action to combat climate change. Improved energy efficiency in the transport sector, for example, may help improve economic resilience with regards to fuel-related price volatility. Lower levels of input help reduce waste flows and emissions and reduce costs for producers and consumers. Furthermore, resource efficiency stimulates innovation, the creation of new industries, and further economic competitiveness. Ultimately, it is good not only for the environment, but also for the economy. An urban metabolism framework has been applied widely as a comprehensive tool for the process of accounting for material and energy production, flow, and consumption in cities. It may be used to investigate the infrastructure, energy efficiency, materials, recycling, and waste management of urban ecosystems. It has been widely used to analyze and support policies that maximize the efficient use of resources in urban settings and the sustainable development of cities and communities. The ecology of cities focuses on land uses and management practices subjected to biophysical and human-driven influences, for example, households, municipalities, and agencies, and feedback loops. Social ecological systems, thus, can be viewed as a coherent system of biophysical and social factors that regularly interact in a resilient, sustained manner. The concept of urban social systems stems from the understanding that urbanization alters nutrient cycles, climate patterns, and diversity distribution. In particular, it affects their functioning and quality, as well as human behavior, community structures, and social organization. Urbanization increases both human and ecological vulnerabilities to environmental and climate change. Inequalities and poverty are magnified through social marginalization. Resource and health insecurity vulnerabilities are worsened by environmental overshoot and changing climates. The interactions and pressures on the environment caused by urban expansion go beyond the city and its surrounding urban areas. These impacts are felt in the deterioration of biodiversity, alterations of microclimate patterns, erosion of topsoil, diversions and interruptions of water flows, among other issues. The ecological dimension of urban resilience sustainability relates to many factors, including waste generation and management. For the purposes of this course, we will focus on waste and material consumption. Waste produced from material consumption indicates the material and energy intensity of the economy. Sustainability objectives, which include reducing the material footprint, will involve the use of secondary materials and the promotion of recycling and reuse. Environmental impacts from poor waste disposal can be seen in impacts to aquatic ecosystems, leachates into groundwater, and other contributions to unsanitary conditions. Flooded urban spaces due to choked sewers arise from poor waste management infrastructure. Sustainable waste and resource management is thus relevant in terms of reducing vulnerabilities while increasing disaster risk prevention and preparedness. In this part of our lesson, we will see how to identify and analyze the roles and relationships of key actors and stakeholders relevant to mainstreaming SWRM in climate resilience and adaptation planning at city levels. In the previous module, we observed that sustainable management is indirectly connected to resilience and adaptation. Multiple linkages at multiple levels exist between SWRM and resilience and climate adaptation. These interlinkages can be analyzed from a systems perspective to provide backdrops for assessing and achieving sustainable and resilient urban systems. Considering the cross-cutting and cross-sectoral linkages, more participative and consultative approaches are required to achieve full configuration and support for transformative, resilience, and adaptation planning. SWRM is complex and thus requires several strategic measures of environmental policy and sustainable development. Efforts to mainstream SWRM require political leadership and commitment from all levels of governance, and multi-stakeholder commitment and participation. A set of measures recommended by the 15th meeting of Governing Council of South Asia Cooperative Environment Programme, SACEP, to promote the gradual phase-in of sustainable waste management and resource circulation include improvement of waste collection services for all, establishment of a proper system to make waste sorting mandatory and citizen-friendly, increase of resource recovery and recycling, diversion of organic or bio-waste out of landfills, accelerating the introduction of economic incentives for waste management, encouraging industries to apply cleaner production methods and technologies to reduce waste, establishment of effective enforcement and regulatory systems to prevent waste burning, littering, illegal dumping, and illegal import and export transboundary, research and application of appropriate alternative technologies for waste treatment, including MBT, RDF, and waste to energy, W2E. Exploring new ways to ease the environmental impacts of landfill sites, encouraging waste producers and managers to implement the waste management hierarchy with respect to hazardous waste. Integration of informal sector, community-based activities, and small and medium enterprises, SMEs. Establishment of national standards for resources recovered from waste. Successful implementation and uptake of a SWRM strategy depend to a large degree on effective partnerships. These are necessary for gaining the requisite resources, including political and policy support, finance, and mobilized capacity. The first step to developing an effective partnership is an analysis of stakeholders to identify who needs to be involved and to understand the interests and positions of stakeholders. Stakeholder maps, when done properly, correct premature assumptions concerning individual actors and the relationships between them. Stakeholders' willingness and ability to engage will determine the degree to which they mobilize their time, knowledge, and resources in support of the initiative. To become aware of the different actors likely to be involved and their respective influence profiles, you can map out the relevant actors, both organizations as well as key persons, and identify the different kinds of stakeholders and their interrelations. Though stakeholders and actors have been used sometimes interchangeably, they have quite different meanings. Actors are persons, groups, or organizations acting within a system of interest. Stakeholders, on the other hand, are persons, groups, or organizations that are affected by the project, program, or policy, interested in the project, and/or able to affect the project. Now let us look at a systematic, stepwise approach to stakeholder mapping. Step 1. Define the scope and objective of the mapping, clearly setting the boundary conditions for exclusion and inclusion. Step 2. Identify the relevant actors and set up their basic profile, classifying them either as primary or secondary stakeholders. Note that primary stakeholders have strong and direct interest, association, or benefits, while secondary ones have an indirect association or benefit. Sometimes it might be required to set and define the period or time scope to cater for the probable dynamic evolution of an interdependent network of actors and stakeholders. Alternatively, a periodic update of stakeholder maps may be pursued. Step 3. Identify key stakeholders' legitimacy, resources, impacts, and networks. Note that this is not exhaustive. Step 4. Categorize stakeholders based on sector, institution, political affiliation, etc. Step 5. Be aware of the gender trap in stakeholder analysis. Step 6. Visualize and draw up the relationships and linkages between stakeholders, either based on alliances, cooperation, formal relations, or other connections. Also note the strategies and tensions that may exist between two or more stakeholders. Step 7. Share and discuss the stakeholder map with different stakeholders. This is vital to identify commonalities and opportunities for strategic partnerships, as well as to anticipate possible tensions, etc. At the end of the session, we will apply these steps to a case study scenario to illustrate how the steps can be applied systematically to map out stakeholders for SWRM and climate adaptation and resilience building. Within the SWRM sector, stakeholders may have quite different or similar characteristics with stakeholders involved in resilience and adaptation. SWRM stakeholders may involve various categories of stakeholder groups, including government, both national and local, the private sector, community groups, households, market associations, private sector, waste collectors, non-government organizations, NGOs, community-based organizations, CBOs, academic and research institutes, INGOs, restaurants, hotels, informal workers, and farmers, among others. Based on the stakeholder mapping, various unique strategies can be designed to suit each stakeholder group. Different stakeholders have access to different types of resources, such as expert knowledge, community trust, political legitimacy, or informal sector connections. Stakeholder engagement concerns the ability and desire of a broad range of people and organizations to engage, participate in, and contribute to the SWRM mainstreaming efforts. A stakeholder engagement strategy should establish the objectives of stakeholder engagement through the plan preparation process and indicate how the involvement of stakeholders is achieved at each stage of the plan preparation dissemination process. Stakeholder engagement should therefore be done in a consultative, inclusive, transparent, clear, and comprehensive manner, because the more willing and able stakeholders are, the more they will participate. The engagement strategy should incorporate the objectives for stakeholder engagement, the details of purpose of stakeholders, as well as methods and responsibility. Various mechanisms such as frequent formal and informal meetings, clear objectives and communication, and outreach programs help to mobilize stakeholders and keep them engaged. Various techniques are available for the engagement and involvement of identified stakeholders in SWRM initiatives or policy designs. There is no one-size-fits-all solution for engaging or involving identified stakeholders. Each technique must be evaluated against the merits and its potential to achieve the desired results. We have come to the end of this lesson and the end of part 1 of the course. We have also reviewed the potential economic, social, and environmental gains for achieving the implementation of sustainable waste and resource management. Let's now go to the next module.